Sorry. I had a kid. I'm remarrying Ashley, so let's get a divorce. A woman like you doesn't deserve George. You're a defective infertile, just disappear. The sound of a healthy baby's first cry echoes in the delivery room. Normally, this would be a moment to celebrate wholeheartedly, but today was an exception. The voice that proclaimed the birth of life weighed heavily. To think I was betrayed. George and Ashley laugh at me, their faces clearly looking down on me. I can't forgive them. I've devoted myself to George for so long. Despite the hardships, I've endured and managed somehow. Those days are now crumbling away. At that moment. Actually. The doctor present began to speak gravely. With his words, the betrayers would soon see hell. My name is Jenny Simpson. I'm a midwife in my 30s. I live with my husband, George. Originally, I loved caring for younger children. I thought about becoming a nursery teacher, but one day, inspired by a video my parents showed me, I decided to pursue midwifery. It was my own birth video. From the time I was in my mother's womb until my birth. My parents had meticulously recorded my growth on video. They also beautifully captured the moment of my birth, which I saw on my 12th birthday when my parents showed it to me. That was the first time I saw how a child is born, and at the same time, I felt an indescribable sense of awe. I wanted to be part of this moment. That's why I decided to become a midwife. To become a midwife, I studied hard. I didn't play around like other kids, so I only had friends who understood my dream. One of them is now my husband, George. George and I were classmates in high school. Back then, we were just friends, and George had a girlfriend. However, a few years later, when we reunited at a gathering of classmates who had become working adults, George had broken up with his then-girlfriend, Ashley, and was single. Honestly, I'm so lonely.
Ah.
I wish there was a good woman like you, Jenny. What is that, are you flirting? I couldn't help but laugh at George's teasing words. However, the look George gave me was dead serious. I realized a few seconds later that he was serious. After that, we started dating. We didn't cause any major problems and decided to get married. We both wanted children after marriage. Despite being still in our 20s, we worked hard on trying to conceive. Being involved in childbirth, I thought I knew how hard it was to conceive a child. However, it was harder than I ever imagined, and I struggled to get pregnant. Could it be infertility? A tinge of anxiety crossed my mind. No, not yet. It shouldn't be time to panic yet. I told myself that, but those around me thought differently. No luck this month either? Seriously? When are you going to get pregnant? My mother is eagerly waiting for an heir. What am I supposed to tell her? George was clearly disappointed, and I understood his feelings, as the results weren't following. However, it's also true that I was feeling down. Furthermore, my in-laws were not silent either. Jenny, still no children? Can't believe it. What will happen if our family line ends? You are the wife of the eldest son, you must fulfill your basic duties. Maybe you're doing it wrong? Here, let me teach you how. To be clear, George's family isn't from a landowning or major corporate background. They're just ordinary people born to an office worker and a housewife. Honestly, I don't think it matters if their family line ends. However, I found my father-in-law's remarks quite vulgar. Sometimes he gave me uncomfortable looks, and I naturally kept my distance. Yet, I cannot avoid dealing with my in-laws. After all, I am the only daughter-in-law of the Simpson family. I need to get pregnant soon. At some point, my simple love for children transformed into thoughts like, I need to have children soon, and I don't know what others will say. These words drove me harder. Pushing myself too hard led to health issues, which in turn made it even less likely for me to conceive, and the vicious cycle continued. However, I didn't do nothing. I suspected something was wrong with our inability to conceive despite our efforts. And after repeatedly begging George, I managed to get him to come with me to the obstetrics and gynecology clinic where I worked. It's obvious the problem is with the woman. Why do I have to go? Just go by yourself. I'm sorry for making you feel this way. But please, trust me as a professional. Please. After days of pleading desperately, George finally agreed. If you insist that much, I'll go just this once. There can't possibly be a problem with me. Honestly, it was a struggle just to get him to come. But maybe something would change after the examination. I was already desperate. The test results could not be provided on the same day, and it would take a few days of waiting. So, we quietly went home that day and waited for the results. However, upon returning home, I found my in-laws' jackets and bags in the living room. Why are George's parents here? We had never given them a key to our house. Yet, how could they enter our home while we were away? It's not good to suspect people, but my inconsiderate in-laws were a different story. If they had ransacked the house during our absence, it would have been unbearable. I rushed inside, and, as if it were to be expected, I caught my mother-in-law coming out of my room. Moreover, she was holding a bag stuffed with something. My face turned pale as I reflexively shouted at my mother-in-law. "What are you doing, Laura?" Caught off guard, my mother-in-law froze for a moment. I snatched the bag from her hands and checked its contents. To my shock, it was filled with my jewelry, clinking inside. Included was my favorite necklace that my mother had given me. It was stored at the back of the drawer, indicating she had deliberately taken it out. What's the big deal? I was just borrowing them. And you're making such a fuss. What are you talking about? This is no different from theft. I'm calling the police right now. As I grabbed my smartphone to make the call, George tried to calm me down from the side. I was utterly confused. Why was George siding with his mother? Furious, I glared at him. Calm down, Jenny. It's not like my parents came here to steal. I invited them to teach you some things about being a good wife. There was a plan to go to the obstetrics clinic today, right? I didn't want them to just wait, so I gave them the key. I was incredulous at George's words. It seemed impossible, but even George was in on it. If we had returned home even slightly later, all my precious jewelry would have been taken by my mother-in-law, and I might never have noticed. The thought alone was enough to make my blood run cold. What's all this noise? I was sleeping, and you woke me up. Hearing our commotion, my father-in-law came out from the back room. That room was supposed to be our bedroom. I later found out that it had been misused. The pillow covers that I had spent good money on were soaked with his drool. My in-laws and George looked at me as if I were the one at fault. Why am I on the receiving end of a one-sided complaint? Weren't the ones at fault my in-laws who entered the house without permission and George for allowing it? Although I was still furious, I had no choice but to entertain my in-laws to avoid any more unauthorized actions. As they said, "We'll teach you how to be a good wife," they began to complain about various things. "Jenny, the coffee is gone. You should know to refill it without being told. Don't you even know that? Oh, Jenny, your cooking is so bland. George is working hard outside, you should serve him nutritious meals. It's pitiful that he has to eat such food. Do this, don't do that." I was constantly criticized and was utterly exhausted. How much longer would this life continue? Would having a child change anything? I slept each night with vague anxieties. There was never a moment when I felt at ease. The only time I felt solace was while I was working. Every day, new lives were born, and although there was no time to rest, hearing the cries of birth somehow brought me relief. Then, one day, I received a call from a paramedic. Apparently, a pregnant woman nearby had broken her waters. And since her regular hospital was too far away, they asked if they could bring her in. If we turned her away, it might have serious consequences. We quickly agreed and prepared to receive her. However, when the pregnant woman and the man accompanying her arrived, I was shocked. Although she looked a bit more mature due to the passage of time, the woman clutching her belly in pain was unmistakably Ashley, George's ex-girlfriend. And the man comforting Ashley was George. I couldn't comprehend what was happening for a moment. It hurts, it hurts. Hang in there, Ashley. Keep going. George held Ashley's hand as she struggled through labor. Perhaps due to the intensity of the situation, they hadn't noticed me. Ashley was already past her due date, so I immediately took her to the delivery room. Despite my confusion over why the two of them were together, I focused on helping to deliver the baby safely. The cries of the newborn echoed in the delivery room. Normally, I would feel deeply moved hearing them, but not this time. Once everything was settled, I went with the attending doctor to Ashley's room. That's when they finally seemed to realize I was there, and their expressions turned startled.
Ah.
Jenny. Why are you here? Although Ashley and I weren't particularly close, we had gone to the same high school and had some interactions. Perhaps that's why she recognized me immediately. At first, both Ashley and George showed surprised faces. But as I remained silent, something seemed to cross their minds, and they began to smirk. Sorry. I had a kid. I'm remarrying Ashley, so let's get a divorce. A woman like you doesn't deserve George. You're a defective infertile, just disappear. At their words, I was left speechless. But it wasn't because I was upset. I was appalled at how hopeless they are as human beings. I had tried my best to get along with George. Although my relationship with my in-laws was the worst, I had desperately tried to overcome that. But this was the result. This was unforgivable. George and Ashley laughed at me, their laughter echoing across the not-so-large hospital room. The other patients in the room looked at them with puzzled expressions. Amidst this, the attending doctor interjected, "May I say something? Actually, the test results are in." I had just received the news that the infertility test results I took the other day were available. I had planned to hear them later, but Ashley's delivery came up, so I ended up not hearing them. Moreover, by some twist of fate, the same doctor who handled our infertility tests was Ashley's attending physician. He's my coworker, and we often go out to eat together. He began to speak with a grave expression. I thought it wasn't necessary right now, but I decided to listen quietly. George is infertile. What? Everyone, including myself, gasped at the doctor's words. George and Ashley started shaking exaggeratedly. George is infertile? No way. But it made sense, considering we had tried so hard to conceive without success. There was always the possibility that one of us could be infertile. Still, the reality was shocking. All this time, I had been harshly told by George and my in-laws that the reason we couldn't get pregnant was my fault. And now it turns out George was the reason. The days I had been scorned felt utterly foolish, and I was on the verge of tears. This brought up a question. We just found out about George's infertility, so obviously, he hadn't been treated. How then could Ashley be pregnant? There was only one answer. Did you cheat on me? You traitor. George grabbed Ashley by the collar, his face turning red. Ashley started to panic, her face turning pale. Her demeanor clearly indicated the answer, and I almost laughed. No, it's not like that. It's not true. It must be Jenny who plotted this. It must be a lie that George is infertile. Ashley was making excuses in panic. Her voice cracked, and it was clear she was lying. Anyone could tell it was a lie from the way she spoke. George seemed to realize this too, as he glared sharply at Ashley. Damn, I didn't want it to come to this. I was planning to divorce Jenny and remarry you. I don't want to take care of a kid whose father is unknown. George said this and started to leave the room, but I stopped him with a wait. George's face lit up. That's right, Jenny still loves me. We can still make it work. Forget the divorce. Let's work together as a married couple. George took my hand, saying such convenient things. Hearing this, I felt how hopelessly unchangeable he was. After all, I wasn't holding him back because I wanted to get back together. No, where should I send the divorce papers? After all, the house we lived in is in my name, right? You'll have to move out after we divorce, so I need to know where to send them. Should I send them to your parents' place? At my words, George exclaimed, "What?" As if he had never thought I would ask for a divorce. Why must I continue with George even after being betrayed? Despite George trampling all over my feelings. No matter how many times he apologizes, I cannot forgive him. Yet, George looked desperate at my words. Don't say that, Jenny. We're married, aren't we? In sickness and in health, shouldn't we stick together? What, in sickness and in health? George was the one who pushed me away first, and now he says this? It was all too convenient, and I was tired of dealing with it. But whatever I said, it wouldn't reach George. As I was pondering what to do, the doctor, who had become invisible in the situation, spoke up. Could you please continue this conversation elsewhere? It's disturbing the other patients. By then, the other patients in the same room were glaring at George and Ashley with disgust. Ashley wasn't in a private room. So continuing the discussion there would only cause further disturbance. I decided to leave the place. Wait, Jenny. George called out to me, but I ignored him and went back to work. Later, disliking the idea of seeing George, I returned home during a weekday when I knew he would be away. Took only the most essential belongings, and left the house immediately. I rented a short-stay apartment until I found a new home. When I consulted a lawyer about the affair and abuse, they said that testimony from the hospital could likely secure compensation for me. Relieved by those words, I sent the detailed document and divorce papers to the house where George was likely still living. A few days later, my phone rang incessantly. I recognized immediately that it was from George and messaged back. Please communicate through my lawyer. However, George, regardless of whether it was during my work hours, continued to call relentlessly. Realizing that I could not keep ignoring his calls, I decided to find time to deal with him. When I answered the call, George immediately pleaded without even a proper greeting. Help me. The real estate agent came to the house. I don't understand what's going on, but they said if I don't leave within a week, they'll call the police. Please do something. I don't want to deal with the police. I could guess the situation somewhat. Well, I had orchestrated it. After deciding on the divorce, I went to the real estate agency to proceed with selling the house. Although the furniture was purchased by me, I wanted to erase every memory of living with George. So, I asked them to dispose of everything, even if it meant paying a fee. Fortunately, I had saved enough money for when we might have children, so I could use that for new furniture. It was meant to be a reward for enduring such a difficult situation for years. When I explained this to George, he responded in a half-exasperated tone. Why would you do something so arbitrary? That house was for both of us. The deed might be in Jenny's name, but it's normal to consult each other. What have you done? If you didn't want it to come to this, you should have contributed to the mortgage yourself. You didn't want to because it meant less money for you to spend freely, right? We had bought the house in joint names. We were supposed to split the mortgage payments. Despite our agreement, George broke his promise and did not pay the mortgage. Consequently, I ended up paying it myself and changed the house's ownership to my name alone. Since I paid the mortgage alone, it's my right to decide what happens to the house without George's input. Moreover, while married to me, George cheated with his ex-girlfriend, Ashley. He's a traitor, and it's only natural that he faces severe consequences. As I was pondering this, George protested, "That's not right. First of all, you're just a midwife. They say doctors make a lot. But there's no way a single woman's earnings could cover all that. You must have borrowed money from some shady source, right?" Certainly, George's words could have a point. Despite being involved in the medical field, a single woman's salary would not normally cover a house mortgage. However, I had a special circumstance. Actually, my family owns land. I wanted to keep that and my substantial real estate income a secret from you to live a normal life with George. Indeed, my family was the landlord of this region and had made a considerable fortune. I inherited some land from my parents and earned rental income from it. George, stunned by this revelation, exclaimed, "What?" I nearly laughed at George's reaction. Then it's about the division of assets. If it's money made after marriage, it should be split, right? Fine by me. But in return, I'll send a formal notice to your company. My parents are furious about this situation. If I hadn't stopped them, everyone who runs a business around here would know about this incident. You'd never be able to find a job again. George gasped at my words, then frantically responded, "That's blackmail. How can you enjoy ruining someone's life? You wicked woman." Such words were thrown at me, but they didn't hurt me at all. It was clear George was cornered. I had done my best to support George and my in-laws. They were the ones who disregarded that. Why then, when they face the consequences, do they panic so much? I couldn't help but find it amusing. Say whatever you want. I plan to handle this through my lawyer, so please don't contact me directly anymore. Goodbye. Wait. Jenny. I heard George's desperate cries, but ignored them and hung up the phone. I immediately blocked his number. Now, I won't have to deal with his incessant calls anymore. I thought that would be the end of it. However, it wasn't over. One day, as I was leaving the hospital after work, a familiar trio approached me. "Jenny. Please, help us. Please, don't abandon us. We apologize for everything. Please, just consider." Yes, it was George and his parents. I sighed at the sight of these three nuisances banded together. How much trouble do they need to cause to be satisfied? There's nothing to talk about. Didn't I say to go through my lawyer if you have anything? Contact them if needed. Don't be so cold. We need you, Jenny. Mom and Dad miss you. Please, come back. Despite their pleas, I had no intention of returning. I was done associating with such people. They kept begging, but I ignored everything. As I tried to leave, my mother-in-law grabbed my arm. Ouch. Let go of me. Please don't leave us. We planned to move in with George. We prepared for it, and even sold our house. But now we have nowhere to live because you sold the house. I was shocked by her words. Unbeknownst to me, they had proceeded with plans for cohabitation. I had never heard such a thing. How could they plan such a thing without consulting with me, who paid the mortgage? We have no place to live now, so we have to spend our days in the park. Please, show some mercy to us old folks. Saying that, my father-in-law kneeled before me. Passers-by watched the scene with disapproval. Some even discussed whether they should call the police. It was embarrassing. To be subjected to this spectacle in public was beyond belief. Their actions were so out of touch with common sense. Yet, they were selfishly focused on themselves. After all the pain they caused me, they still tried to deepen my wounds. How could they be so insensitive? I couldn't understand their thought process, and I sighed. Then George pleaded desperately. Please. Find a way. You have a place to live now, right? Just let the three of us stay with you. Indeed, I had found a new home and moved after all that happened. Of course, I hadn't told George and his parents my new address. That's probably why they came to the hospital, clearly aware that I was here. Also, I got fired. I can't make a living anymore. I can't even afford to eat properly. Fired? Why? Looking at them, they were indeed dressed shabbily. But could I have imagined he was fired? It was expected that I wouldn't spread the news about this incident in exchange for not dividing the property. And I had made sure my parents kept quiet about my situation, understanding and respecting my decisions. So why had he been fired? It's Ashley. When I told her the marriage was off if the kid wasn't mine, she lost it and caused a scene in front of the company. Eventually, it got out that I had cheated, and that spread everywhere, making it impossible for me to find another job. What are you going to do about this? No, even if you say that. I never imagined that such a situation would happen. Perhaps, due to Ashley's rampage at the company. And the fact that George betrayed a well-known landowner's daughter became known. The local business owners probably didn't want to employ him. Now, George has lost both his home and job. And my family's estate continues to thrive as landowners. It's clear which to value more. I did feel sorry, but that doesn't mean I should extend a helping hand. As I shrugged off my mother-in-law's arm and tried to pass by, George desperately cried out, "Wait. Please, don't abandon me. You're all I have left, Jenny. I have no one else to turn to. Please, Jenny. Don't abandon us. Please, I beg you." Their pleading voices followed me from behind. It was so annoying that I had to say something. There's no fool around who would help trash like you. Just resign yourselves to living at the bottom. After saying that, I left the scene without looking back once. I heard through the grapevine that afterwards, George and his parents seemed to have disappeared. In fact, when we encountered each other at the hospital, the compensation was still unpaid. So I had my lawyer demand that it be paid promptly. Soon after, the compensation was paid in full, but I have no idea where that money came from. At that time, George had lost his job and had no means of earning money. So, how on earth did he manage to come up with such a large sum? Probably pressured by my lawyer, George and his family must have panicked. A lawsuit could have made things even more expensive. So, they must have scrambled to gather the funds before it came to that. It's hard to know what desperate people might do. Maybe they took out a huge loan from somewhere they shouldn't have. Even after paying the compensation, they had no means to repay the money. Places like that are notorious for not caring about how they collect their debts. Once they realized there was no hope of repayment, they probably ended up on a fishing boat or something similar. The elderly in-laws must be working hard despite their age. I don't intend to sympathize, but it did seem a bit pitiful. As for Ashley, her attempt at cuckolding ultimately failed. And her parents found out that and disowned her. The child was taken in by her parents and is apparently being raised properly. I was relieved to know that the innocent child didn't have to suffer. Without her parents' support, Ashley apparently turned to the night world. However, she quickly found the work too harsh and wanted to quit early on. But with nowhere to go and no one to rely on, she couldn't leave. As for me, with all my troubles gone, I'm enjoying my days. Having learned my lesson from this ordeal, I've become even more dedicated to my work. To be safe, I asked to the director and asked to be transferred to a hospital in the city center. I was anxious about whether it would work out, but once I started, I found everyone to be kind, and the conditions were even better than at my previous job. Today, once again, the cries of a newborn echo in the delivery room. For a while, I couldn't fully rejoice at those sounds. But time has healed those feelings, and now I can sincerely say, congratulations. It's not guaranteed that I'll walk through life without any worries. Maybe I'll face even greater challenges than before. But still, I want to stand firm on my own 2 feet. And continue to be someone who can genuinely celebrate the birth of life. Even if hardships await, I'm determined to overcome them. That's what I've promised myself.